Time now for business. Let's say hello to Yuka Royer. Later in the France 24 debate, we're wondering, is Paris still going to be Paris? Now that the lockdown is easing, things are going to be different, even though we're seeing it's day one of cafe terraces being open. It won't be quite the same as before.
Yeah, well, the hope is that it will be as close to normalcy as before. It's the second phase of the government's plan of lifting lockdown measures ahead of a full reopening of the economy at the end of June. Business owners are upbeat, though the situation could still be tough going forward. Despite months of closure, the number of bankruptcy filings in 2020 was the lowest in decades, but that was largely thanks to the government's financial support. The phasing out of these measures could leave the most vulnerable businesses at risk. Now, the French economy has picked up and is expected to grow 5.5% this year, though that's after a historic 8.2% drop in 2020. Now, to help businesses stay afloat, especially in vital sectors such as the airline industry, governments in Europe have approved billions of euros in state aid. But on Tuesday, an EU court annulled the support extended to two airliners, KLM and Portugal's TAP. The decision comes as a legal victory for Ryanair, which has been challenging state bailout for national flag carriers during the pandemic. Claire Rush reports.
Since the start of the pandemic, Ryanair has led a legal onslaught against national bailout schemes for Europe's legacy airlines, arguing they violate the bloc's competition law. The low-cost carrier has filed more than a dozen lawsuits against the European Commission for approving such schemes in EU member states, all of which had failed until Wednesday, when a top EU court annulled bailouts for KLM and TAP that had previously been approved by the bloc. Ryanair hailed the decision in a statement.
The European Commission's approvals of state aid to Air France KLM and TAP went against the fundamental principles of EU law and reversed the clock on the process of liberalisation in air transport.
The General Court ruled that the European Commission had failed to justify its approval of the schemes. In the TAP case, the Portuguese government provided the carrier with a low-cost loan of 1.2 billion euros. As for KLM, it received a loan and state guarantees worth 3.4 billion euros from the Dutch government. While that aid has now been annulled, the General Court suspended its immediate application, meaning the airlines aren't on the hook to reimburse the subsidies just yet.
The Commission indeed takes note of today's judgment by the General Court. What we will do now is we will carefully study the judgment and reflect on possible next steps.
Ryanair's legal challenges come amid steep financial woes. Earlier this week, it reported a record annual after-tax loss of more than 800 million euros after COVID-19 travel restrictions forced it to scrap 80% of its flights.
Now, amid calls to make more COVID vaccines available to developing countries, the European Union put forward a plan to help boost production more effectively than a temporary patent waiver. The plan focuses on export restrictions and use of international trade rules set by the WTO, World Trade Organization. The lifting of intellectual property rights to vaccines has recently got the backing of the United States, but the Commission's Vice President for Trade says the most effective way to achieve universal access was to ramp up production and make them more affordable. Take a listen.
The EU has a renewed responsibility as a major producer and exporter of vaccines to ensure global access, especially for the most vulnerable. The rules-based global trading system can and should contribute towards this goal.
Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies tumbled to the lowest levels in several months over China's move to crack down on digital money. Beijing on Tuesday banned financial institutions and payment companies from dealing with cryptocurrency transactions and warned investors against speculative trading. Bitcoin has dropped around 14% in the past 24 hours, falling well below the $40,000 level. At one point, nearly $1 trillion were wiped off its market capitalization. Ethereum and Dogecoin also dropped by nearly 20%. Now, the news from China came as an additional blow to Bitcoin, which had already been under pressure after Elon Musk, the head of Tesla, said the company would stop accepting the currency for payment. The value of Bitcoin is now about 3/5 of its peak in mid-April, although it's still more than 4 times higher than a year ago. Now, the fall of cryptocurrencies is weighing on investors' risk appetite. Major bourses in Europe continued their downturn this Wednesday. Fears of rising inflation, as well as commodity prices, also pulled share prices down. As you can see, all down, finishing the day in negative territory. US markets all in the red too, as a sell-off of technology shares continue. As you can see there, the Dow Jones down by almost 1%. A shipment of Uniqlo's men's shirts got blocked at a port in Los Angeles on concerns they were made with cotton produced in China's Xinjiang province using forced labor. A recent document of the US Customs and Border Protection showed that the blockade happened in January of this year and that the agency rejected an appeal by Uniqlo's owner, Fast Retailing. Imports of items suspected to be made by forced labor are banned under US law. In a statement on Wednesday, Fast Retailing said it was deeply disappointed by that decision, insisting that the company makes sure that human rights violations such as forced labor do not exist in its supply chain. That's it for business.
All right, many thanks for that, Yuka Royer.